Yeah, he is. He's a good guy. But a lot of Iowa fans, forgot. Even me at times. Through frustration, you're sitting there and just so everyone's so pessimistic about the program. Coach Licklider did not come in here and plan on having 3 awful records. He did not want the team to be bad. He was trying his hardest, and it just didn't work out. And you can't even blame, Gary Barta for hiring him either, because he hired the National Coach of the Year. When you do that, you expect to see a winner out on the floor. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, but Coach Licklider, nice guy, and that'll, I think that'll get him a long way. He does things the right way. And you know what? I really, all Iowa fans have to be grateful. We had 3 bad years of Iowa basketball, but he didn't leave us and start suing the school right away because we fired him, or, he didn't leave us because he had a bunch of recruiting violations. He didn't leave us with anything like that. All he left us with was a basketball team that needs to start winning again. So there's no aftermath like schools like Indiana have had to deal with after, losing Kelvin Sampson. They are going through a really nasty rebuilding process. Hopefully ours goes a little smoother for that reason.
And I agree with your sentiments. I hope that Todd Licklider has a successful future. I think as history, as we look back, I think people are going to look at Todd Licklider and say he did not do it the right way here. He didn't embrace players that were here, and I won't say he forced people out, but there was definitely acrimony between players that were here and differences in the way he handled players that Steve Alford had recruited and players that he recruited. And clearly that acrimony, those issues were what drove this program towards the bottom. And again, I hate to be so negative about it, but he was his way or the highway, and his recruiting style is something that's questionable, and history will judge this, in the next 10, 15 years, depending on how Fran McCaffery does. And this is why I like Fran McCaffery, because I don't see him pushing a bunch of guys out, saying this is my way or the highway. He's going to work with players, compromise, reconcile, and bring everyone together and sell this program. And that's what we need to look forward to in the future.
Well, let me clarify myself too. What I meant by doing things the right way was, what I just went into is, he didn't, go through all these violations.
Yeah,
he ran a clean program. I've been close to someone inside his program that was recruited by Alford, and I found out some things that I probably wouldn't have liked about the way, as you mentioned, he handled Alford's recruits and his recruits. But he did run a clean program. That's kind of what I was alluding to.
Okay, let's move on. Not only was Iowa hiring a coach in the last week, but 2 other big schools made offers. I think chief among them, St. John's. And Steve Lavin, who's been out of coaching for 6 years, is now the new head coach at St. John's. And I think it's a good hire, and here's why I think it is. You got a guy like Norm Roberts, who was at St. John's. Norm Roberts was a good coach, but the thing is when you're in New York, you need a personality, you need a brand name. Steve Lavin has that. Now, I know he hasn't coached a lot on the East Coast, but you look at what he did at UCLA. UCLA, he took them to 6 NCAA tournaments, and he took them to 5 Sweet 16s, and I think he did a good job there. He's good with managing and recruiting talent, and he was an assistant coach for Gene Cady at Purdue. I think he has the resume. He stressed, when he was interviewed during the NIT tournament on the sideline, he stressed that he needs to put a good staff around him who's going to recruit the East Coast. I don't think that's a problem, especially with him being in the spotlight at ESPN over the past couple of years. And then the other, which we'll talk about, Tim Floyd at UTEP. He was used to being an assistant there for Don Haskins, and he's coached in the South before. He coached in New Orleans, and then, of course, he coached at Iowa State, coached at USC, coached in the NBA. I think it's a good hire for him, to be honest. I think he's a good coach. Now, maybe some questionable recruiting or maybe paying of athletes, but I also think that just in the Conference USA, I just find it's like the second chance conference. You take a look over at Southern Miss, you got Larry Eustace. You got Matt Doherty over at SMU. You had Tom Penders at Houston, who now just resigned, and they're talking maybe Billy Gillespie will take that job. So Conference USA, second chance conference. Jordan, what do you think of these 2 hires?
I don't, have a ton to say about the Floyd hire. It'll be probably a good fit. As we mentioned, the big time program, especially with the recruiting violations, allocated against him at USC, maybe not the place for him, as far as, and in the NBA, not a successful coaching career with the Chicago Bulls And, I don't think he's the type of guy that wants to just be an assistant floating around the league. I think he wants to run his kind of program. And, it'll be good. And, you look at UTEP had a successful season. So that'll be, it's not like he's going and has this massive rebuilding job. He should be able to work with what he has there. And then I like the Steve Lavin hire a lot up in St. John's. He's recruited a large market, one of the biggest markets in the nation before. He's been out at UCLA in Los Angeles. Now he gets the chance in New York. And you look at the Pac-10 conference now and the Big East conference. The Big East conference is a more favorable conference to recruit kids to, probably just because of how much attention it gets, how talented that conference is. And it'd be nice to see, that conference is so deep already. It'd be really nice to see a team like St. John's. I'm not going to say they'll be at the top, but be towards the upper part of the pack.
I'd almost disagree with you. I think the ACC is a lot tougher conference to recruit in because you look at who he has to recruit against. Syracuse, a lot of other ACC teams too on the East Coast. So I'd almost say it's a tougher place to recruit, but you just got to market the program. I mean, you're playing in New York, you're playing your home games at Madison Square Garden, and I think if you bring, like I said earlier, that brand name Lavin, I think it's going to help you in recruiting. But I think it's tougher to recruit at St. John's and UCLA, especially UCLA when you got the tradition of UCLA. You take them into the arena, you point to the banners. I mean, it kind of does the job for you.
I think as far as the draw, the draw to New York City. And you mentioned, the home games in Madison Square Garden. Those two things, is what I was, alluding to as far as a good draw. It's not going to be easy to compete with those schools, but I don't know. I'm liking the Big East right now.
Salzman, you just covered my main point about the St. John Steve Lavin hire. I think he's going to have a harder time than people expect recruiting and getting players to come there because he doesn't have that UCLA brand to sell, the John Wooden era to sell to his recruits. But I think in the end that he's better. He's better. He's going to make the program better off. But we'll have to see how hard it will be for him to recruit because St. John's really hasn't been that strong of a program since the 80s. With Tim Floyd at Texas El Paso, ethics violations and recruiting violations, academic fraud, they travel with you. Calipari, there's still ruminations about his issues. Even at Kentucky now, when there's no proof, and I'm not trying to imply there's any evidence that he's cheating or doing anything wrong there, but at UMass and at Memphis he had those issues. They always follow you. And as you said, Conference USA, the Second Chance Conference, this is a chance for him to have a clean slate, start over at the college level, and if he has a lot of success there, maybe he can move to a big-time program again. I don't know if anybody else will take a chance on him, but good for him. Hopefully he can get the job done and do it the right way.
Definitely. Final Four this weekend. We'll talk a lot about basketball on this show. 2 5 seeds, Michigan State taking on Butler. And Mike, first of all, let's talk about this too. Do you like the fact that we have 2 5 seeds in the Final Four, or do you like to see the best teams duking it out? I'll add my 2 cents in personally first. I just like to see good games. And I don't care what the seeds are. I want to see good basketball games. And, West Virginia, Kentucky was billed to be maybe the game of the tournament, one of the best games of the tournament. It wasn't a really good basketball game. But you take a look at how Michigan State got here. In the Elite Eight, they had to beat a 6 seed Tennessee. And if on paper, a 5 seed versus 6 seed, it's a great basketball game. So sometimes, these big matchups don't live up to the hype. I just want a good game. Mike, what's your take?